If you play Geometry Dash for a decent amount of time, you'll realize pretty quickly that a massive achievement in the game is to get creator points. It's a point system that's supposed to reward high quality levels that shine above the other 90+ million other levels made by Little Timmy and Joe, giving you something shiny to show off on your profile. Depending on how good your level is, it can get 1, 2, or 3 creator points. But if you've been in the community for any more than a few seconds, you'll realize that this system is very exploitable because of the nature of how it works. A sufficiently talented creator can make a rate-worthy level in just a couple of days, because the standard to get one nowadays is surprisingly pretty low. But what if we gave ourselves just one day? And instead of trying to get 1 creator point, we tried to achieve the highly revered 3 creator point epic rating in the game. Well, that's what we did. Throughout my 8-year-long career in this game, I've never achieved that myself, but that's exactly the challenge that we took ourselves up to. Featuring Zindergame, Knots, Blee, Ilrel, myself, and so many other people who are so much more talented than me, let's see where this goes. Also, remember to subscribe. I post all the time, I stream, I post shorts. It's honestly a great time over here, and I'm sure you'll enjoy your stay. It's July 2nd at 10:30 a.m. Each creator is preparing color palettes, art references, and concept art. They're being pulled from every corner of the internet imaginable. Honestly, it was inspiring. I think having a direction with your projects before you start them is incredibly important, so you're not completely in the dark once you get started. It also helps you test out colors to see what could work and what doesn't, so you don't go to create what you think is going to be a masterpiece and then it just turns out something like this. Anywhere here, this is what I made for my preparation. I doodled it in my notes app for about 30 seconds, and I think that it's very pretty. Needless to say, I was very underprepared for this because I've never done that before. However, I was forced to make a color palette, and I ended up making this. Not gonna lie, I completely made those colors up on the spot and wasn't really intending on using half of them, but you know, it does still work, as you'll soon see. In fact, it was now, when I was just starting to get my bearings, that it was time to begin.
Seven, six,
6,
five,
5,
four,
4,
three,
3,
two.
2, 1. Happy New Year! Woo!
Happy New Year! Alright, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go.
Okay, I'm gonna...
And we were off. The aim difficulty for this was definitely supposed to be 9 stars because we totally weren't told to make this 7 stars, and then half of us just didn't listen. That's not what happened at all. So here I started making my definitely 9-star gameplay. You've gotten me like addicted to robot parts, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, I always just default to robot instead of cube now.
Nice. You finally understand why the beauty of robot.
No, it's still shit. It's just something that I haven't been able to get off.
Shut up. Don't talk to me ever again.
So the first course of action of yours truly, after a bit of the base gameplay was finished, was to replicate the beautiful blueprint I created earlier. Initially, my idea was very similar to another very blurry block design I won't quite show you guys for my upcoming level in Liminal, but as time went by, I slowly felt the inspiration start to come to me. I noticed I had very ambitious ideas, but was quickly learning that I didn't really have the skill to pursue all of them well, and so this is where I learned my first big lesson. If you want to improve quickly at this game, or even in real life, the first thing that you need to learn is to let go of your ego. You have to humble yourself a bit. You're not going to know everything right from the start, so getting help, receiving feedback, or even having people make some things for you just for the learning experience is totally okay. It's honestly odd how often I see people take so much pride in having to make stuff completely on their own. Interestingly, I think that idea contributes to why megacollabs in Geometry Dash generally have literally one person and one person only work on their section in the song. For art, I think it'd be best if we all worked together and gave adjustments and feedback to all of the level. But I suppose that would be harder, so let's just keep it as is. Besides, the current system does make pretty cool levels like these. Speaking of which, while I was making my block design, I ended up getting some help from Zindergame, who gave me this neat sine wave line thing to use for my blocks. Yeah.
Zero, I have some sine wave preset if you want it.
Oh, I'd love that.
How many?
Yeah, it's like a sine wave outline. I will give it to you.
Oh.
Maybe that will work.
And it did. It worked so well, honestly. I then went on to finish the basic curves for the structures and then went right into the curves for the extra details on top. After finishing that out though, I tried something new. Have you ever seen a pretty sunset and gone, wow, this is so beautiful. The colors are insane. Well, turns out it's a lot harder to replicate that than I thought. I was taught some of the basics from this by my friend Leah, but oh my God, was this rough. You'll see throughout the rest of the video, the gradients will change over and over and over and over again because it makes no sense. Continuing though, onto things that I'm a bit better at, I thought it would be a nice idea to make some flower pots to fill up the environment. These were inspired by Knots, who quite often add small elements like lights, leaves, or plants to populate the environment, and I got inspired. I originally tried to make them brown until I realized that the pots aren't like made of dirt, they just kind of hold dirt. So I made it blue and it looked a lot better, like immediately. I'm smart, I swear. Then I made these circle bubble things that I also think look terrible, so you could say that I'm on quite the roll right now, actually. After swiftly deleting that, I zoomed out and took a small break. And if you look quite closely, you can see this. Turns out when you zoom out in the editor, smaller scaled objects will simply disappear. It's great. That bug gave me the idea to make an out of focus version of the blocks, which I think turned out pretty well in the end. I added these layers to them that are background colored with varying opacity to create this hazing effect, which, if you don't know, is why objects slowly begin to disappear if they're really far away. You know, I'll be honest with you guys, I don't quite know how that works or why it does, I just know that it does. So, not my place to argue with physics, I just work here. This effect was also used for these falling leaves I added that are pretty much the same as any particle effects you've seen me do in the past. I quite like how they turned out, but later on you'll see they don't totally like... You'll see. Dude, you guys are so lucky that you get to see this like edited down luxury funny version of me building in 20 minutes, because in reality I had taken so long that it was actually...
So what are we calling this level, by the way?
They're going with 24, but I don't know if that's what we're gonna land on.
What do you think, Xander? Give me a good idea.
Why you asking out of everyone? You asking me for names?
Dude, you chose white space. I mean, I gotta go for the best.
I also choose boss 3 electro, boss 4 laser eye, boss 5 developers.
Okay, I did exaggerate a little bit because I did do some off-camera work in between the two clips, and I really want to show you guys. Firstly, I went ahead and finished the gameplay that I actually do think works for a 7-star, but I'll let you guys be the judge of that. I also added an extra gradient on top of the first one for a really important reason. If you look, my part is in between Zipper and Zender Game. While looking at the color palettes for each creator, I noticed Zipper was going for like midday clear skies, while Zender was going for a much more golden hour vibe. So my part being in the middle has to transition from midday to sunset. So to start this idea, I began the part with a subtle orange tone in the corner to indicate that the sun is setting and will slowly lower throughout the part. Now, if you take a look at the footage, you can see that something else also did get added. Can you guess what it was? Maybe. Okay, yeah, you guessed it. There's clouds now. So you may be wondering, hey, Zero, you added leaves earlier. Why are there clouds now? And I'd say, nuh-uh. Okay, but how did these clouds come to be? Actually, well, to explain, this goes back to my previous point that you don't actually have to do everything alone. In the end, I think the clouds were one of the best additions to the part, so prioritized quality over my pride and asked another decorator called Claire to make one for me. I wasn't confident in making clouds at the time, and from the amazing progress that Claire had shown, I wanted nothing more than to have that as a good example of what to do. She ended up making me one fully finished cloud, as well as a loose form for a second one in about 20 minutes. She's an absolute goat. Everything else in the end was made by me, as I used their teachings and some research to make my own. A rule of thumb that I learned is that generally as you add layers to the normal clouds, they'll become more desaturated and sky colored the further back they get. I think I did really good with the clouds, all things considered, but this was a learning experience 100%. Now around this time is when we had our first progress check as a team, and being just over 1/4 of the way through, let's see what we have. So my part is before Zendergame, and his part is before Knots. Not to mention all of the other legends that are featured in this project. Me being completely new to this style, I felt an incredible amount of pressure to stand up to their work. Now, I'll be completely honest, I know that I'm not super experienced in art or this style in general, so I'm totally banking on pretty colors and effects to carry. No, I'm kidding, but I do think that colors can really push a part to the next level from good to great, you know? So, since I am pretty experienced in colors, I thought that I would use that to my advantage. Like I said earlier, this having to go from midday to sunset, I then introduced the ship section with a soothing but explosive shift in atmosphere, creating a rich orange sky accompanied by a dominantly cloud-filled foreground. But obviously I can't only have clouds. Where even is the gameplay if there are only clouds? Well, I didn't want to just copy and paste the blocks from the first section, even with the time constraint. So I thought that instead I would create some designs that resembled wind, thus fitting into the atmosphere while not creating geometry-design into the mix. By GD design, I mostly mean stuff that's blocky or uses default textures and patterns, or really anything that just doesn't add to the more artsy environment being constructed. I do want to make it clear that these can work sometimes, but for the most part, finding a way to incorporate your designs into the environment will make for a more immersive product. Anyway, I again used the sine wave lines that Zender gave me from earlier because I felt the smooth lines would work best to create a more elegant and wispy vibe to the section. I don't love it so far, but it definitely works. At this point, I have been building for over 6 hours straight, and wait, Zero, where are... Bro, stop doom scrolling, bro. What are you doing? My guy, what do you... No, get back to your... Yeah, so it's 2 a.m. now. I was taking a quick commercial break to play some Among Us on stream with the gang.
That's Zero? Is it Zero?
Zero. Zero.
Oh, it's me. It's my turn. My name is ZeroSR, and I am not a VTuber. You see, I play but back to the project. By this point, we had 5 out of 11 parts finished, and the progress that was being shown was looking phenomenal. I honestly don't know how some of these creators were able to pull off what they did on such short notice, but let's make sure that my part can still hold up next to everything else. Over the next 30 minutes or so, I finished out the block designs for the ship section and copied over the designs from the first robot to finish out the cube. To explain a bit of my thinking here, while making the block designs, I had a rough image of the old cartoon wind shapes you'd see as a kid. I wasn't trying to mimic them one-to-one, but rather I used the elegant curves and light colors to recreate the same feeling you'd get from those. In terms of the actual creating process, there isn't too much to explain here. I was just creating shapes and filling them in appropriately. The smaller shapes I'm making were actually inspired by flowers rather than wind, as they sort of resemble flower petals. Although I could also understand it being seen as wind currents, so it works either way. I think in the future I'm going to work on having more consistent ideas, but I do still enjoy how this looks overall.
Oh, that's...
So,
okay, I need to get them
to get them to be the right color, I think you would need to, because they're a little bit too yellow right now, I think they should be a little bit more pink.
To add to the overall atmosphere and transition for the ship, I went on to add a second gradient for the sunset. In the beginning, I had the orange tint at the top, and originally I was going to simply rotate the glow to slowly transition to the bottom, but the game really didn't like me moving such big objects like that. So instead, I just copy-pasted the original gradient, flipped it upside down, and switched to which gradient was visible at the ship section. This way, it does happen faster, unfortunately, but it does allow the end of the part to get more moody and orange with an actual indicator that the sun is setting. At some point when making the colors for the ship, I accidentally turned the cube blocks yellow, which honestly looked so good, I just kept it. You know, happy accidents, I don't have time to question it. And speaking of time, at this point it was like 4 or 5 a.m. or something, so as much as I wanted to keep building and just not sleep pull an all-nighter, I knew that I had to conserve my energy for the final stretch the next morning. We had 24 hours to build an entire megacollab, and now there's only 1 hour left. Let's get through this. So I held off on adding all of my smaller effects, knowing that I could push through in the last moments, so I immediately got to work. To get through them, some quick fire effects I made were some portal and orb effects, some glow lines, some song synced object movements, arrows, glow obstacles to prevent skips, and lastly, my logo. For the portal effects, I did a simple opacity pulse as well as a rotate trigger. It's set up so that when you pass through the portal or orb, the square becomes visible and rotates 135 degrees. The glow lands, on the other hand, are taken straight out of the books of all of my layout creators out there, so shout out to you guys. It's really just 2 lines of glow that are squished together with an opacity pulse. I'm not sure if you noticed, but the flower pots also bump up in sync with the song. On top of that, I added a touch triggered pulse that lightens up the pots whenever you land on one. I don't think I really need to explain those, but they do add quite a bit to the world building, I think. Like the objects in the world actually interact and respond to the player. The glow obstacles were really the last thing that I added. It was to prevent people from finding like unintended secret ways for the level. I'm not sure if they're foolproof, but I can only hope, you know. And with only minutes to spare, I made my final transition in their Zender game, adding dynamic move triggers that cover the player with clouds that then get faded off, introducing the next section. $15,000 objects later, over the course of 11 hours of playtime, in a finished megacollab part done in 24 hours. I actually did it. This was the fastest thing I had ever done, and I was honestly exhausted. But the job was not quite done yet. Over the next day, I would spend maybe 6 or 7 more hours helping to merge the level, which was actually quite fun. I made some transitions completely custom by myself, a totally new experience for me. I also did help fix some visual bugs and balance the gameplay to make it a lot more bearable for you guys, which I don't think I did too good of a job on that, and I'm sorry, but you know, you have to understand that a lot of these creators don't usually make gameplay. But I promise you guys that we'll definitely do a lot better of a job next time. Wait, next time. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. We've seen the insanely positive feedback the project has been getting, and I couldn't be happier with how all of the parts turned out. This was probably the best experience I've ever had in this game. I'm sure you guys have noticed as well, but I've been back on the content grind. I took quite some time away, and I plan to make a video sort of explaining why, but in the meantime, you guys should expect to see a ton more shorts, streams, and activity on my Discord server, The Penthouse, which you should totally join. It's a ton of fun over there. Oh, and speaking of which, you should also follow my TikTok and Twitter, and my threads. Should we even like have threads? Follow all 3. I'll be headed out now though. I'm gonna go touch some grass. Well, what's grass, you might be asking? I wouldn't worry about it if I were you. It's something that you only gain access to once you either quit Geometry Dash or sell your soul to Vibrant. Wait a second.
I get the shivers whenever I'm thinking about you.